All right, everyone. Well, welcome to our final session of Pakistan-US virtual academic collaborative online international learning session between Florida International University, scholars in the United States and Pakistan. So we're honored today to have our two final speakers for the series, Professor Nathan Katz and Ellen Goldberg, who will be talking to us today about primary research that they have done on the Jewish communities in Cochin in India. So just to introduce both of them, Professor Nathan Katz pioneered essentially the field of Indo-Judaic studies, looking at the interaction between Indic and Jewish civilizations. He himself is a scholar of Buddhism. He has initiated both Hindu-Jewish and Buddhist-Jewish dialogue. He personally knows His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and actually have brought him to Florida International University, which is an amazing honor. He's written numerous books on thinking about Indo-Tibetan religions in South Asia and the diaspora, and particularly this connection between Judaic communities and South Asia. So it's a very unique field of study that he initiated. He also has a journal, a foundation that's dedicated to preserving this heritage and also research about it. And he was also instrumental in establishing FIU's sort of Asian and Jewish studies and really gearing it and particularly pioneering the Jain Studies program at Florida International University, which was the first endowment for Jain Studies in the United States. And from there, there have been like 15 to 20 now endowments of Jain Studies. So Professor Katz is a legend in the field, and we're very honored to have him. And the second is the amazing Miss Ellen Goldberg, who is a Miami-based author, writer, editor, and photographer, who for 17 years served as Jewish engagement and identity professional with Greater Miami Jewish Federation. She's written in the Christian Science Monitor, the Jewish Press of Tampa. Her books include The Last Jews of Cochin, Jewish Identity in Hindu India, that she co-authored with Professor Katz, co-editor of Ethnic Conflict in Buddhist Societies, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Burma, and has published in the Boston Globe and St. Petersburg Times, Hadassah magazine. She has also done exhibitions at University of Jerusalem, National Jewish Museum, and also the Jewish Museum of Florida. She also has extensively traveled and is a scholar and expert in her own right. So they both complement each other in really amazing ways, which is great as a couple and then also as scholars. So with that, I will turn it over to Professor Katz and Ms. Ellen Goldberg.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear friend. And Assalamu alaikum, Juma Mubarak to you. And very happy to be, so to speak, back in Pakistan. I say back because I visited your area many, many years ago, several times, and always found it just to be a wonderful experience. So thank you for having us with you. So now I'm going to split the screen, I hope. There it is. And what we're going to do, this is not a deeply analytical paper. It's somewhat impressionistic. It makes the most use of Ellen's photography. And it's just to give you a sense of the Jewish community in Southwest India, which is undoubtedly the oldest Jewish community in South Asia. It may well date, as they claim, from the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, which would make it 2,000 years ago. That's their story. Doing historical research, we have absolutely no doubt, based on physical evidence in India, that they've been there more than 1,000 years and quite possibly 2,000 years. So whatever it is, that's a very long time. It's very Indian, very Jewish at the same time. And this is the interior of the synagogue in Cochin, the main synagogue in Cochin. It is a gorgeous little place. And the first thing to tell you is that Indian Jewish communities are extraordinarily diverse. They are not connected to one another so much that here are some pictures. In the upper left is from Kolkata, in the upper right from Ahmedabad, the lower left from Mumbai, the lower right from Delhi. And in the center up, that is a woman leaving her synagogue in rural Maharashtra. And what she's doing is what Jews do. They kiss this, what we call mezuzah, that's the thing below her, that's on the doorpost of our house. And in that rather attractive box contains certain handwritten verses from the Torah.
So how did we get there? We were living at years ago in Sri Lanka for a year. And at that time, we had heard that in nearby Kerala in South India, there was a Jewish community, little known about it or written about it. And we were very intrigued. So at the end of our year, we had gone to visit, and we were so taken with Kerala's diversity and the Jews' happy story there throughout the ages, that we decided we must come back and document this community before it was too late. And 2 years later, we did just that. We ended up spending a year in, well, you can go to the next, it's fine, thanks. In Jewtown, as it's called. We were the first people to spend that period of time in the community in over 100 years, we later discovered. That's from 1986, but it may well have been 100 years earlier. The picture is pretty much the same, except for the electrical wires. Now you can see that it is called Jewtown, which is merely descriptive. Often in the Jewish diaspora, we would be very fearful of a name like that, but each population throughout Kerala, which is, as I said, very diverse, has its own, whether it's Hindu town or Muslim town. It's just simply descriptive of the people who live near their places of worship. And here you can see Jewish Cemetery Road. Things have developed since we lived there, but this was our daily life. People are also very happy to display their worship. It's often in the United States, which is a place of freedom, religious freedom for most people. We'd be a little reticent to display who and what we are so freely, but in India, that simply was not the case. This is, of course, the classic window of someone sitting in a window seat by the window, and often gets a lot of photographs by tourists.
This is a rather grand home in Fort Cochin, right by the port. And this was the home of the Koder family. And the Koders were the leaders of the Jewish community in South India until, alas, they are no more, and their beautiful home is now a hotel and a restaurant, not a terribly good one, but this is, the heights that some Jews attained in the spirit of freedom that pervades Cochin. This is the city right across the bay. This is the city of Ernakulam. And this just shows right in the middle of all the normal kind of shops you would see. Right there is Menorah Cassette Shack. Cassette dates how old the photo is, I guess. Menorah is a Jewish candle. That's what we hold our candles in. And it's called Zion or Zion Agencies with the Jewish star. We Jews have been afraid most of our lives in most of the countries in the world. And India is one place where we Jews have never had to be afraid. And I can't tell you how singular, how unique that is in the world. This is from the sub post office in Matancherry, which is the other name for Jewtown. And this is a commemorative postage stamp issued by the government of India on the 400th anniversary of the Cochin synagogue. You can see it right there. There was a great celebration. Indira Gandhi came. It was a great day, that celebration of 400 years of a synagogue. At the time, it was the oldest continuously functioning synagogue in the entire British Empire. And what tourists like to do is you go to the little tiny sub post office, you buy a postcard somewhere, you go to the post office, you buy a stamp, and if you can get this stamp, you're in luck. You write your postcard and they cancel the stamp. The post office cancellation mark is a Jewish star, a Magen David.
So everyone we tell that we spent time with the Jews in India, they all want to know, what do they look like? We were initially staying nearby in a small hotel within walking distance, because traditionally we don't drive on the Sabbath. But within a week or so, we were invited, an incredible invitation, to move in with one of the people in the community. And as they say, to truly know Jewtown, you must live Jewtown. So we did. And these are some of the people. What the woman in the far left is holding, it's a case containing what we call a ketubah, which is a traditional marriage contract. Often these days, they're very fanciful and decorative and beautiful. And I know in the West, we tend to display them in our homes as a work of art, a treasured work of art, because really what the ketubah is a marriage contract that basically outlines the rights and responsibilities of the groom in relation to the bride. But there in Cochin, they tend to keep them rolled up in these cases, and that was a particularly special one made of silver. And again, more people in the community. The man in the upper right-hand corner, the shorter one, was the man with whom we stayed for the year. He was a retired attorney. And many of the homes, because people had upped and gone to Israel, spoiler alert, they had these big Dutch colonial homes, that many of which were virtually empty or had one person there. So he generously opened up his home and his life to us for an entire year. And these are some of the younger people. Well, they are the younger people pretty much in Cochin, because as we'll describe, people were dwindling from the community, which was what brought us there in the first place, to document the community before it was too late. This is another family on the left. To the right is Raymond Salem, with whom we lived. And it was Republic Day, so he was hanging the Indian flag. And Indian Jews, much like Jews in whatever their adopted country are very patriotic. And so he would proudly display the flag.
Now, I have to explain these photos. Both of these photos illustrate the relationship between Hinduism and Judaism. The one on the right is rather whimsical, that Ellen just waited all the time this is the gateway to the synagogue courtyard, and you can see the Jewish stars and the candelabras in the grill work. And of course, there's the ubiquitous cow that you see all over India. So this is Hinduism meets Judaism fancifully. But the one on the left is I think, extremely significant and serious. This photograph is taken from the living chambers of the Maharaja of Cochin. So when he'd be sitting in his room, looking out the window, this is what he would see. And the sort of round structure on the left side of that photograph is the Maharaja's private Hindu temple. And to the right there are the other buildings associated with the temple. Now, since there's no more functioning Maharajas, that is now a regular public Hindu temple, but it's a Hindu temple next to the clock. Right, makes sense. Then there's a wall, and on the other side of the wall, on the left is a clock tower, and on the right is another building. The right is the synagogue, and the left is the clock tower of the synagogue. Right next to the Hindu temple, right next to the Maharaja's palace. When Jews started to come to Cochin from a city called Kranganur, a bit farther north, the Maharaja welcomed them and gave them a tract of land about a mile or two long, just adjacent to his residence, because he wanted them to be his nearest neighbors. They were his trusted advisors. They had Jewish commanders in his army, had a Jewish prime minister. The Jews were very useful to the Maharajas and to the people of the Malabar, of Kerala, because they were always traders. They were always in contact with Jews in the rest of the world. They were never, ever isolated. They were involved in the spice trade for centuries and centuries. So the Jews in Cochin knew the Jews in Cairo. They knew the Jews in Arabia, in Baghdad, in Europe later on. So they were always doing commerce through their co-religionists in other outposts. So there was a network of communication and commerce. The commerce benefited the economy, and the communication was valuable to the king as a kind of, the leader of the Jewish community knew more about the outside world than anybody else in Kerala, frankly. And so the king wanted him nearby. There's also undeniably a very deep and serious fondness between Jews and Hindus in India and most anywhere. Looking a bit more closely at the synagogue, on the right is the clock tower. The clock tower, the face of the clock we're looking at is in Hebrew, right? Hebrew numbers, they're letters that we use as numbers. On the right, which you can't see, faces the street, and that is in Devanagari or Indian numbers. And on the other side, facing the harbor, is in Roman numerals. So for the outside world, they spoke Latin, Roman numerals. For India, they knew Devanagari words and letters, and for themselves, they knew Hebrew. That's who they were. And you can see this, this is the wall of the synagogue, and they incorporated a previous cornerstone from an older synagogue in Kochangadi, which is part of Cochin, that dated from 1344. They were there much longer, but in Cochin itself, there's been a synagogue for very nearly 1,000 years. Pretty remarkable for us now. Okay, this is the interior of the synagogue. It's beautiful. There's just no question in my mind. There's one man on the right saying his morning prayers, which reflects that the community has dwindled sadly and profoundly. So that is very difficult to get the required quorum to have communal prayers. In fact, it was just a couple of weeks after we left Cochin that in July 1987, for the first time in 420 years, the community did not get the required prayer quorum on a Saturday morning. And that was a moment, a very sad moment in the history of the community, a kind of, if I'm not being too dramatic, a death knell for this magnificent community now.
The prayer quorum being 10 males.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, 10 males. To say our prayers, we need 10 males over the age of 13. Finally, just some little details of the synagogue. They were import-export trade. So you see on the left these beautiful chandeliers from Belgium. And you may see a kind of lamp in the center. That's from Belgium. And they're in the synagogue, and they became people, their neighbors, they're from the masjid, from the temple, from the this and that. They saw these lamps and loved them. So the coders, excuse me, arranged to import many of these clear lamps. And you will find them in almost every house of worship of any faith in Kerala today. That's the paradigm. And finally, this is in the heart of the synagogue. The fellow on the left is the caretaker, a member of the synagogue, and I'll just discuss what he's holding in his hands a little bit later. Now, every synagogue has a cabinet called an aharon, sometimes called an ark, like the Ark of the Covenant kind of thing. And in that aharon, I'm using the Hebrew word because I don't know, to me it's simplest, are Torah scrolls. And these are the Mikra. These are the handwritten revelation that is read. That's a Mikra. Same word you use, of course. 3 times a week in the synagogue services, the public reading of the Torah. These Torahs are encased in the Sephardic style in a wooden cylinder that is covered with hand-worked silver. There are crowns on the top of the Torah and little things, finials hanging, I don't know what they're called, hanging down, finials. And those crowns and the finials are made of 22-karat gold. And the gold, if you can see, is encrusted with rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. So you know how religion is. You want to do your best for God. So the Jews want to do the very grandest they can to express the love of God. The point I want to make, the second Torah scroll from the right, the crown there was given to them by the Maharaja of the neighboring state of Travancore in 1803. So that's just amazing that when a king wants to give a house of worship some honor, I know in America, I spoke in a very old synagogue in Georgia, and it had a letter, I'm sure a copy, a letter from George Washington, our first president, that said, we welcome Jews in our country. He sent those to these 7 or 8 synagogues that existed in the United States at that time. They're very precious. Look, the king, the president, the Maharaja, they like us. So everyone should like us, basically. That's honor, that's respect, that's acceptance. So more than a letter, something that is useful in the religious life of the community. To me, that just displays a remarkable sensitivity and understanding that is just so Indian.
So Nathan was just discussing about reading the Torah, which is, of course, our most important book. We typically read that from what's called a bima, or a pulpit. Now, what's unique about Kerala is that they architecturally are very unique, the synagogues, that is, and they actually have 2 bimas, or pulpits. This photo on the left was actually taken upstairs adjacent to the women's section. And I should mention that traditional Jews, men and women are segregated. They can either be downstairs side by side with a partition, or up. The women are upstairs, the men are downstairs. And typically in the West, all the important readings and what have you are done from the bima or pulpit downstairs. Not so Kerala. In Cochin, we found that all the important liturgies, which are read on Shabbat or our Sabbath and festivals, are done upstairs adjacent to the women's section through some lattice work, so that we could hear as well as the men downstairs. So we're into preparations.
Okay, so there are 2 main festival seasons or holy day seasons in Judaism. The first come in the autumn and the other ones come in the spring. Now we're talking about the autumn or fall holy days. And the first of those is Rosh Hashanah, which means the first of the year. This is our New Year's festival. And this just shows, here's Sarah Cohen, a nice Indian name, no? She's making special Jewish cakes, they're called. And she makes these little cakes, they're delicious. And before Rosh Hashanah, she gives them to all of her neighbors, especially Gentile, non-Jewish neighbors, as a kind, exchange of foods is a highly charged act. And to give food and accept food says a great deal about their social relations and so on. And so Jews shared their food with others as a way of establishing social connection. On the right is just the way they set their table so beautifully for their holidays. Okay, 24 is here.
Okay, so you'll be seeing a lot of photos of Sarah. Sarah, during the course of the year, we took our meals with Sarah and her husband, Jacob, and we stayed with Raymond. And she really was my guru for the year. I learned so much about life there. And in a way, it was great because traditional life for Jews, men and women have their separate but very distinctive roles in society and community. So I followed her around a lot. I was her shadow for everything. Here she's lighting what is called a teria. Typically our festivals start the evening of, and so we basically are watching her lighting what is called a teria, which is the candelabra or menorah. Okay, and now with the fall festivals, as Nathan said, like Islam, we follow a lunar calendar, so we never quite know from one year to the next when our festivals will begin. But this is Yosef Halegua. He's blowing a ram's horn, and traditionally we blow this for a full month before the beginning of the festival, and then during the festival itself, it's 100 blasts of the shofar. Concluding with Yom Kippur, or our Day of Repentance, as it's often called, which arguably is the most important holiday that we observe, when we basically make amends with God and man and ourselves for what our actions have been over the course of the previous year.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going into Sukkot, which is a fall festival. The Cochin Jews typically would coordinate their clothing and their colors with the festivals. On the right, you see Raymond Salem holding traditional, they're called the 4 species, which we typically wave in a ceremony for Sukkot.
Okay, one more, 25. Sorry, 27. Okay, so that's me. So the last day of the cycle of holidays for a full month in the autumn is called Simchat, or rejoicing Torah, rejoicing in the Torah, the fact that God revealed this book to us. We celebrate. Every year we read some of it each week for 52 weeks. And then when we finish one cycle, right away, we start the next cycle. So it's continuously read throughout the calendar. Simchat Torah is the day we finish and begin the cycle of readings. And this is the most distinctive celebration, Jewish celebration in Cochin. In our books and our writings, we talk a great deal about how important Simchat Torah is in Cochin, more so than anywhere else. But I can't tell you the whole story. But look how beautifully they decorate. They take the Torah scrolls out of that aron, that cabinet, and they put them on this table in front of the aron. They call that in Malayalam a kula, a temporary resting place for the Torah scrolls. And they display them there for a full week before the festival. The walls are all decorated in their finest silks. They're jasmine strung around the lamps. And the smells are beautiful. The sights are beautiful. They do all they can do to really live it up for this holiday. Again, all to honor God and the fact that God reveals to us. And on Simchat Torah, what the Jews there do is they take the Torah scrolls, you can see, and they march around outdoors with them. In days gone by, they would march through the city streets, not only in the synagogue courtyard. This is frenzied, joyous, celebratory activity. They have their own songs they wrote in Hebrew centuries ago in Cochin. They sing them, and scholars are now just beginning to collect, I have many, and analyze this unique Jewish literature of Cochin. The men wrote songs in Hebrew for festivals. The women wrote songs in Malayalam that were for life cycle rituals. So for a wedding or a circumcision ceremony or whatever it is, they would have Malayalam songs sung by the women. And for the public festivals, they would have the Hebrew songs written by the men. So here are the public processions. And let me tell you, in very few places in the world would Jews dare to have a procession in the streets with their Torah scrolls, celebrating their identity and their religion. Jews are just so struck when we tell them about this.
This is daily life then and now. We also rated a lot of family albums, and there were some wonderful photos that they shared with us, like the one up top left. A hotly contested card game in the streets of what's called Synagogue Lane in Jewtown. The lower right is a picture that basically shows the diversity of friends who have been, these men have been friends for 50 years, of every imaginable faith in the area, and just like brothers, a band of brothers, often up to no good in a mischievous way, but it was wonderful to see.
I just want to point out the gentleman on the right, Iqbal, you'll be interested, is the president of the local Jain temple. So they always have this question, they always have snacks, who brings the food, right? Who brings the food? So maybe you know, maybe you don't, but no one in the world has stricter dietary regulations than Jains. They're not only, the vegetarians say the least of it. So whatever a Jain can eat, everybody can eat, is the highest end. So the Jains brought the food, so whether their guests are Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or whatever, they all could enjoy and celebrate together.
This is for the Festival of Hanukkah, which we recently celebrated. It's an 8-day festival that celebrates a victory over oppression that we had many, many years ago for the Second Temple in Jerusalem. So we light what is called the menorah or the Hanukkah. And here you can see the caretaker in the synagogue lighting the one there.
You might be interested. We light candles at the beginning of every Sabbath and every festival. That's the way we mark the beginning of a holiday. But you may have noticed that we have different kinds of lamps that we light on different holidays. I don't know any more than that. I just think you might find it interesting.
So here we are, Shabbat or our Sabbath it begins sundown Friday evening through sundown on Saturday. So it's a 25-hour period where we basically just halt, which is very unique, especially in this modern world where it's go, go, go 24/7. It's a time for spiritual endeavors, for going to worship services, for study, for spending time with family and friends especially. It's a time when we unplug, which in this day and age is quite unique to do and important.
Yeah, I just want to throw in that if you're interested in learning about Judaism, in my opinion, and I think many would share it, Shabbat is the most important, the most distinctive observance in the whole religion. And if you can understand what Shabbat means to us, I think you understand what our religion teaches us to be.
There's a saying by the Ahmed, who famously had said, more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. And so true, so true. And here are just some scenes from Shabbat. I have to say, by the way, a number of these things were staged because these are traditional Jews where you would never dream of photographing or doing any kind of work. I mean, that is really a hallmark of Shabbat, not to work, not to create, because God created everything in the universe, and on the seventh day he rested, and we're supposed to emulate godly ways, and that means halting. So anyway, this shows the reading of the Torah, our sacred scroll. Whoops.
Sorry.
Women in the women's section praying, and then in the lower left we have a little ceremony for ending Shabbat called Havdalah, which separates the sacred from the everyday.
Now, the spring festivals center around Passover, which you may have heard of. It's the story of the Exodus from Egypt that is reenacted. This is very important in any Jewish community. And frankly, people they're proud of how strictly they observe this holiday. Jews who don't observe so much may observe Passover strictly, and those who do observe a lot observe it all the more strictly. So what Sarah there is doing, lower right, she is looking at each grain of rice that they will eat for these 8 days to make sure it's perfect.
And it's checked 3 times.
3 times, twice by the servant, once by the Jewish woman of the household. It has to be perfect. And Rima Salem on the left is doing the same thing with the wheat berries. Everyone is inspected to make sure it's perfect. Fastidiousness is part of many kinds of religious practice. For Passover, we have several New Years in Judaism. There's Rosh Hashanah, the calendric New Year, the birthday of the world. We also have the spring New Year, which is celebrated among other aspects of Passover. For Passover, we clean obsessively the house. I won't go into all the reasons, but one of the things we get everything out of there, clean it out, including in Cochin repainting everything every year. So here's a guy they hired to paint that sort of semi-famous gate window screen in the Cohen household. Now 36, 37. The culmination of Passover preparations is what they call matzah day. Matzah is the flat, unleavened, rather tasteless, cracker-like bread thing that we eat for these 8 days in memory and reflecting the haste with which the Israelites fled Egypt. They couldn't bake bread. They just cooked it quickly. It didn't rise. So we do that. Now, Pesach is spring, is well, you know, it's the hottest time of year, just the hottest time of year. And to make this matzah, this kind of bread, in this heat, it's an unbelievable, difficult task, but the women do it every year, and sometimes they'll drag a man in to help out a bit. But this is the process, and they all get together, they bring their wheat, they all make this matzah cracker bread together, and then they all take it back to their homes. I think we're here.
Yeah, different seders.
Passover, Pesach, begins with a special meal, a symbolic meal. Iqbal, you've been to our home for Seder. I wish I could invite you all, because again, this is something we do that's pretty unique, and it reveals much about who we are. But this symbolic ritual meal is the first night of Passover. And here in 2 neighboring households, just before the holiday starts, we see people seated at their table about to enjoy the meal and celebrate the ceremony. There's a day in the West we call Lag BaOmer, which just means the 23rd day of a certain month period. But it's called Bar Yochai in the Sephardic world. And Bar Yochai is the greatest mystic of Jewish tradition. He wrote the Zohar, which is the Torah is our main text, the Zohar is our main esoteric text. So they chant prayers to Bar Yochai, and they light candles, and no big deal, but they celebrate a little bit differently than the rest of the world, and it's a very mystical kind of holiday.
So why did they leave? They had a very good life in Cochin. They had been there for hundreds, arguably even longer period of time in India, and India was their home. They loved India. But there were a number of factors that began with India's independence in 47 and Israel's statehood in 48. Many of the religious people in the community wanted to go back to the land, as our Torah commands, to return to the land, which is exactly what they did. Entire villages around Cochin just up and left when they were able to do so, many in the 50s and then another wave in the 70s. So you can see that some of the synagogues then became abandoned or dilapidated. But as more of the community waned, there were less eligible marriage partners for their children. Politically, they had a very good life under the Maharaja. And then, of course, when democracy swept in, it swept away a lot of the rights of minority groups. So for many, it was time to go. And so you can see this is another that at the time was a dilapidated, I think they were using it as a go down. It's the Kadhavam Bagam synagogue, which now Kerala has been restoring a number of places of worship, of every imaginable type of worship. And this is actually being restored to its former glory, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and the interior of this building, which was the holy place, that was taken and sent to Israel. And it was restored. In fact, coincidentally, we knew the chief architect in the restoration team in Jerusalem, and it's in the Israel Museum now. And there it is like the symbol in to the larger Jewish world represented by Israel of Jewish life in Cochin. They have basically recreated the interior of a unique Cochin synagogue. And so that's their purpose there. In Kerala, they are restoring many houses of worship. As Ellen mentioned, they call it the Muziris Project. Muziris was the Romans' name for this part of India. And this Muziris was always lauded as the most religiously tolerant country in the world. And it was, I'm not sure it still is. And you had, just for example, in one town, you had the Maharaja's palace on a hill. One trail down led to the synagogue directly, another to the church, another to the masjid, another to the, what did I miss? The church, right? So it just showed the king was rested on the four great religious traditions found in Kerala. We have a great deal to learn from the traditions of this region. They got this touchy point of pluralism. They got it right.
But it was wonderful, you know, having seen these places once, just these dusty, vacant places to be restored. It was beautiful. It was given a whole new life. And during our time in Jewtown, I mean, we often would accompany people to take people to the train on their way, whether they were meeting up with family that had already made it to Israel. But, you know, you can see people, childhood friends, saying goodbye, possibly for the last time to their dear friends and loved ones.
So why did they leave? They had a good life. Why would they leave? Ellen mentioned it, and we tried to capture it here. The top left, that's lack of eligible marriage partners. That vest and those caps he's showing, those were worn by Jewish grooms, men getting married. And he's holding it, and sort of to us, it means, will I ever get to wear it? In fact, he didn't. Then the top is, they're waiting for the prayer quorum to start so they can have prayers. And the waits got longer and longer and longer. On the right, just studying in the synagogue by yourself. On the left, now we get to the political dimension. There was constant labor troubles in Kerala. Not that that had anything to do with the Jews, it didn't, but this was right in front of the house we were staying. And in this bottom center, Kerala in 1957 elected a communist government. India's a democracy. That's very nice. And like most communist governments, they want to redistribute land from the landowners to the landless. Nice, unless you're a landowner. And the Jews and the synagogue were landowners. So overnight, they lost all their property, all their lands that sustained the synagogue, the community, and individuals was gone. Nothing against the Jews. This was just standard policy, but it had that impact on the Jews. And finally, lower right, increasing commercialization. As a Jewish family left, they would sell their large house, and most of them are curio shops, and you have a large Kashmiri population in Cochin now. So the end of an illustrious era. You know, this is the cemetery in Cochin. I'm happy to tell you this has been beautifully restored and it looks gorgeous now. Yes. But this is the state things were in the middle 1980s, and it's poignant and sad.
Right.
But
well, it looks like another Kerala synagogue. It's in fact a Kerala style synagogue, but this is in Israel. When people left as early as the early 1950s, they took with them blueprints of the synagogue, which they created in the Israel desert. This is in a place called Nevatim in the south, and it is very much the Cochin or Kerala architectural style. They were also able at the time to bring out some of their Torah scrolls, which you can see that are in the Aron there. And all Cochin families, and we like to consider ourselves honorary Cochinites, which we were very touched and honored to be called by the people there, have a photograph. You can sort of see it there in the center of the synagogue, of the Cochin synagogue. So wherever they are, it's always close to them in their home and in their hearts. And this is a family, a young family in Israel that is far away from the synagogue, but they proudly display it in their home.
So a little look, quite literally, of a Jewish community that I argue has had the best life of any Jewish community in the world, in the sense in India, if you're religious, people like you. Sorry to stereotype like that, but I wear one of these things. It marks me as a religious Jew, and I'll be wherever I am, and people come up to me, "Oh, are you from Israel?" "No, I'm Jewish. I'm American." "Well, please, sir, may I get you tea? I want to ask you questions. I want to learn about you." Or I'll be saying my prayers in the morning on a train, and everybody so respectfully observes and comes and asks questions. All I can say is it's a marvelous place for Jews to be. In Cochin, they were honored for being Jewish, as anybody's honored for being Zoroastrian or Parsi or Muslim or whatever they are. If you're religious, if you're pious, that's a good thing in India. So that they could do. However, they were also totally free to contribute to the larger society. They were commercialists, they were shipbuilders, they were soldiers, they were advisors to kings, they were lawyers, they were professors, all the things that one might be. But there was no bars to their participation, as there were everywhere else in the world, except for China, but that's another story. So I'm sad. I'm sad that Cochin, it's certainly not a viable community. It's not a community at all anymore, just some individuals who live there. That's sad, and that's happening in many places in the world as these small, attenuated Jewish communities return to the home, which for that I'm happy. That they have a very good life in Israel. They're very happy they're there. It's where they believe they're meant to be. But at the same time, I mourn what is lost. I love South Asia passionately, and the Jewish communities were part of South Asia until recently, including in Pakistan. And we can even talk about that a little bit if you care. So thank you for your attention. I think we got it in time.
And we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. So I will also then turn it over to Professor Ahmed as a discussant for a few remarks.
Great.
All right. So Professor Ahmed is an assistant professor in the Islamia University in Bahawalpur. He trained at International Islamic University. And he's actually currently writing a chapter. He's written a chapter on the communities in on Judaism in Urdu, and he's also working on a project on writing a chapter, an academic chapter for students to learn about Jainism. So we're very honored to have Professor Ahmed to serve as a discussant. Professor Ahmed. You're muted.
Yes. In the name of Allah, who is most kind and merciful, let me start by thanking Dr. Iqbal Akhtar Saab for arranging this event. And I also thank Dr. Alan Goldberg and Dr. Nathan Katz, my favorite one, for their contribution. Two of your works I came across, Who Are the Jews of India, and other one was Studies of Indian Jewish Identity. And I also apologize for the dim light of my camera. This is weekend. I am in my hometown. That means what should I say? The southwest part of the South Punjab, less comfort, more sand. So you have shown us Cochin, actually, not just talked about it. What I will try to add is what Muslims has written on Jews, and especially on the Indian Jews. We can say that what Muslims has written on Jews and Judaism, especially on the Jews of the Indian subcontinent, should be of some importance. It is not wrong if I say that the study of other religions did not get much appreciation among Muslim writers. This does not mean we are neglecting the works of towering figures such as Shahrastani, Ibn Hazm, or Al-Biruni. What I want to say is that if we compare the writings produced on Islam by Muslims and compare it with what is written on other religions by Muslims, then we can safely conclude that the study of other religions was not considered as important by Muslims as it should be. However, as the Quran talks about Ahl Kitab and other religious communities, and Jews were residing along with Muslims in Medina, there is a lot of discussions about them in Tafasir, the commentaries of the Holy Quran, in the books of Islamic history and Islamic law. What is not done in the case of Jews is their academic study from the Jewish point of view by Muslims. As Dr. Iqbal Akhtar also pointed out, I have recently completed a book on Judaism in Urdu. Urdu is the common language or the lingua franca of Pakistan. I was reviewing what was already written on Jews in Urdu by the Muslim writers. There are discussions on Jewish history, especially political history, their doctrines, their ethics, and relationship with Muslims. In their nature, most of these works are historical and political with a polemical tone. I did not find anything written on the Jews in the Indian subcontinent by Muslim writers. Muslim ruled India for about 1,000 years. It seems they were unaware of Jewish community living in Cochin. However, when I was studying Sayyid Ahmed Khan, the famous educationist of the 19th century, I found that he was an expert of Hebrew language. According to some traditions, Garcia Datasé, the famous French Orientalist, would say that he did not meet someone, including Jews. This is the important part, including Jews. Sayyid Ahmed Khan was more expert of Hebrew than the Jews, what Garcia Datasé said. From where Sayyid Ahmed Khan learned Hebrew? This was the question came into my mind, because he also wrote Tabyinul Kalam, his famous commentary of Torah and Injil. Altaf Hussain Hali, his biographer, tells us that he took classes of Hebrew from a Jewish teacher, only to enhance his knowledge of Hebrew. He already knew the language of Jews because sometime he was appointed in a village when he was doing government job. The whole village knew Hebrew, the whole village. So he learned Hebrew from there and then hired a Jew who taught him Hebrew language. Apart from that, I am not able to trace anything written about Jews in Urdu, Jews of Indian subcontinent in Urdu, especially in the works written directly about Judaism. There is lot of other Urdu works like on geography, on politics, on literature. There is no OCR. We cannot search from Urdu text, so it is very hard to find something in Urdu from if we are trying to find from the whole literature. So what I conclude after reviewing the like 40-50 works, that none of the Muslims have written on the Indian Jews yet. And as we know that the earliest extant record about Jews of Cochin is a 1,000-year-old inscription in Malayalam on copper plates, by which Indian princes granted exemption from taxation and other privileges to them. At about the same time, a largely autonomous Jewish principality was set up at Shingli near Cochin. After the arrival of Portuguese in the 16th century, their antipathy forced the Jews to abandon Shingli to settle at Cochin. There they maintained a vigorous Jewish life. The Jewish community at Cochin probably never numbered more than 2,000, if I'm right. Dutch rule of 1663 was a time of prosperity for them, but again the coming of British in 1795 declined them economically. And finally, as you said, after Indian independence, which was closely followed by the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the community immigrated to the new Jewish homeland. At the end, I want to share with you, especially Nathan Katz, that I am teaching Judaism for about 4 years. Each time when I am teaching about Jewish festivals, I always advise my female students that go to YouTube and search about Jewish dishes and cook them. They are so delicious. Most of the time, yes. Most of the time, my students ask, "Sir, did you ever taste any of Jewish food?" And I always replied to them, "No, I didn't, but I will, inshallah." So thank you very much. Thank you for this lecture.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Anytime you're here, come to our home, we'll feed you.
Thank you very much.
I do know a scholar in India who works in Urdu. He's also Pakhtun.
Norris Data Fredi, yes, I know him.
Okay, I just want to make sure you knew him.
Yeah, I know.
And of course, there's a lot being done about this claim to Pakhtun roots in the Jewish people. There's a lot of people interested in this question.
Yes.
I think Professor Katz, and Ellen, if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about it. I know you had visited Pakistan, and we would just maybe like to hear your time here, and I think that might be of interest to the audience here.
Well, it was a very long time ago, very long, before most of you were born, I'm sure. I've been very fortunate, and one of that good fortune was that after I graduated college, I got a job with U.S. Foreign Service, and I was stationed in Kabul, in Afghanistan, and I lived there for 2 years, and I got to know the Jewish community in Kabul reasonably well. But during that time, I'd often go to Pakistan just to see some greenery, to be frank with you. And I loved the area that's now called Bakhtunwal, the Swat Valley and north from there, and traveling around there. I've been briefly in Karachi, and one time I drove across from Kabul to Delhi, and of course I stopped in a number of places, including where you are now in Lahore. Gorgeous, gorgeous city. People would, out of a natural sense of curiosity, what religion are you, they would ask, assuming I was Christian, because I'm white, basically. And for a long, I didn't know what to say, because I knew there were problems between Muslims and Jews. I didn't want to get hurt. On the other hand, I was curious to see what the response would be. So I got around to the courage and I said, well, I'm Jewish. The response knocked me off my seat. It was remarkable. My cousin, welcome, was the kind of response I would get. It was wonderful. Now, again, I was living in Afghanistan. I spoke the language reasonably well, and I could talk to people. So I wasn't surprised so much that I was accepted. I was very interested in Sufism, as I am. I was able to study with some Peters and so forth, and Mazar-e Sharif and places like that. There, it wasn't a problem because I belonged there. But as a tourist in Pakistan, it was dicey. But I think, now this is a long time ago. This is 50 years ago. And then I think things were a little different than they are now. But then the response to being Jewish was an embrace that touched me deeply. And intellectually, it touched me deeply because all the ideas I had about there's all this animosity between our faiths, it was gone like that. Also, one of my assignments in Kabul was to teach English in the Faculty of Sharia in Kabul University with the mullahs there. And I also audited their classes so I could learn something too. And we had many sessions over many cups of green tea about Judaism. And I didn't know much at the time, to be honest, but we did, and they would tell me what they believed. I would tell them what we did and believed and so on. Again, in Afghanistan, I knew there was a solid basis. In Pakistan, I found that it wasn't only Afghanistan, but it was traditional Muslim people who are our cousins.
That's very cool. I mean, I think that that's something that, I think that's something that from the outside, particularly in the United States, people don't realize that Pakistan actually has tremendous, not just diversity, but I would say like an openness, right? So I think that's sort of one of the things that you see is that most traditional cultures have an openness to learning about, there's this idea of hospitality that's very deep within traditional cultures. And so, whatever you can say about sort of the political challenges, I think on a personal one-to-one level, and that's kind of part of what I'm very happy to be here in a Fulbright, because it's kind of what Fulbright does as well, right? This idea of what we call citizen-to-citizen diplomacy, right? The idea that you're able to connect with people one-on-one, and through those interactions, you help to make a difference, you inform people. And, for your lecture, I mean, we have had at least 45 people that have tuned in, over the course of the time. So that's really remarkable as well, right? So just through a virtual format, we're able to connect to people who are able to also learn about Judaism, and particularly in Pakistan, where there might be misconceptions or misunderstandings of the tradition. That's amazing. Yeah.
Anybody who would like to continue a discussion with me, Professor Akhtar knows how to reach me. And if you have any questions or anything or any comments, please, I will respond to you.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll put it in the chat. I think it's a Katz N, right? Yeah, Katz N. Yeah, at FIU.edu. To continue. Yeah.
I just saw one of the comments
about the Christmas cake.
Yeah, interestingly, there is a crazy rush for Christmas cakes at the only Jewish bakery in Kolkata.
At Nahum's Bakery, which is Awesome.
Yeah, beautiful.
So Nakia is joining us from Calcutta, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah.
One of my favorite cities.
Yeah.
So. Oh yeah, go ahead, Nakia. Yeah.
No, I just said that makes two of us.
So there's a question here by Alphonse. In Cochin, did you come across the Talit or Yamuk?
Yes,
Yamuk. Okay,
sure.
okay. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
That's all. Yeah, that's
Okay.
universal. That's Judaism. Doesn't matter where. They
So-
may look a little different from place to place, but we have to cover our heads, at least on most occasions. There's different opinions how often, but we cover our heads when we pray, and ideally we cover our heads all the time.
Okay. So what was unique? Like, is it so unique that you would be able to tell a Cochin yarmulke from other ones?
Oh,
Or was it
yes.
similar? Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, ask Ellen a question. I'll show you some.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's quite different.
Yeah, sort of a pillbox shape kind of thing, rather than the cylindrical kind that many people wear in the West.
Okay.
But yeah, and often a number of traditional women also will cover their hair. That's often the way it is in practice too. But it depends whether someone is traditional or not.
So are the majority of the community was traditional in Cochin?
Oh, entirely. Yes.
Entirely. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I should mention, at least for women who are viewing, men too, that the women there were both religiously and secularly very well trained and
Yes.
very knowledgeable.
Yes.
We have a thing that we do in our religious services when we're reading from the Torah, where you basically, if someone is reading, because there are no vowels or anything, it's so you when you're reading, it's not unusual to occasionally make a mistake. And what we typically will do is call out the correction, which can be unnerving when you're seeing this or happen to be reading from it, but it's what we do. And it wasn't only men who would call out the corrections, women would too. They were really knowledgeable.
I've never seen that anywhere else, that women knew enough and had the whatever it takes to call out.
They weren't shy.
No. Okay, you ready? Want to see a Cochin yarmulke?
Please, yeah.
This is a festival one. It's fancy.
Oh, this
Okay.
one. Woo.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That looks like vaguely Central Asian or something like
Sure.
that, in terms,
Yeah.
like
There was
style.
one photograph of Sarah Cohen, sewing as she was at her sewing machine. And for each festival,
Oh, wow.
they
that
would
was
have
very
different
beautiful.
coordinating colors and designs that coordinated with the festival itself.
Mm.
And
It is
So
the
how did-
here in India and Pakistan.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. So Professor Ahmed is saying this is very similar to the styles that are used in India and Pakistan.
Ah,
Yeah.
Frankly, I got this in a Dargah in Delhi. So, both.
Tofi. What was the language you guys were using when you were communicating with the community?
well,
English.
yeah, I mean, Malayalam
Yeah, okay.
is what people speak in Kerala, but at least for the Jews, their first language at home was English.
English, Malayalam, Hebrew, they were native fluency in those three.
Right.
Wow.
Everybody.
And-
And many knew Tamil or Hindi for, for their where they worked and for business purposes.
Frankly, the Christian missionaries, you can criticize what they were doing, but they also set up a network of schools, which also is why both men and women were very well educated, secularly as well as religiously.
But the religious education is traditional, and
Yeah.
the women in Cochin, as Ellen was mentioning, their level of knowledge I don't see here.
Wow. So what accounts for that? Why did they invest, or why was there more access or interest, or?
it's very important to them. It's not a big answer.
Right.
We're all, it's part of our religion to learn about the religion. To study is one of our most important religious acts. So in Europe, the women not so much, you know, and the men did the studying. But this is not only this in India, but it's Kerala, and you have a Nair culture
Right.
among the elites,
Right.
which of course is a matriarchal culture that basically underlies Kerala, I think.
Mhm.
And I think, having said we're supposed to learn, which is true, but why women, to the extent, I think that explains a great deal to me. And not only that they learned, but they would call out that they had that self-confidence or whatever that takes. So yeah, you know, when you really study something, you get rid of a lot of the presuppositions you have, and that's certainly one of them.
But I think you're right. I mean, you can't underestimate the impact of the Nair
Oh, yeah,
culture
absolutely.
on the Jews there. I mean, they were physically as well as being very close.
Yeah, I don't know how the best way I can express who they are is they're fully Indian and fully Jewish at the same time.
And very proud of both.
Very proud of both. And that's a difficult concept for many people, because they'd ask, are they Indian or are they Jewish? And that's not an or. Don't ask me if I'm American or Jewish, because you'll have a fight on your hands, because I'm a patriotic American and I'm a religious Jew. And to me, that's not a problem at all, because I live in a free country. But when somebody asks me that kind of question, it creates a problem. I have in my mind a book by Jean-Paul Sartre called Anti-Semite and Jew. And that being Jewish is a natural condition for Jews, except when they encounter non-Jews who ask them those kind of questions, and it divides the Jew again. You know, Sartre has his own way of expressing things, but he was onto something there. The defensiveness of Jewish identity is a responsive act to our history.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting question. Are there any comments on the relationship of Indian Jews and Muslims? So what was it in Cochin? Did you see any connections between the Jewish community and the Muslim communities? Okay.
Absolutely. But to be honest, not particularly Muslims. The Jews there got along with everybody. And in the traditional society, if I'm not being too naive, everybody got along with everybody except when they didn't. But they largely did. Religion did not divide people. Sadly, recently it started to, but it did not in the traditional society. Jacob Cohen, the guy sitting in the window seat, was an attorney, and his best friend was another attorney of a similar age named Hamza, obviously a Muslim man, and they were just the closest friends since law school days.
They call each other their other wife.
Yeah, right.
They were together. They were inseparable.
And in Kolkata and Mumbai, up there, the people who run the synagogues are all Muslim. You know, who do the cooking, who do the, you know, yeah, they work for the synagogue, but they have great authority and position in the synagogue. And Jews tended in Mumbai, Kolkata, to live in Muslim areas, because I guess they felt a natural affinity to Muslims as fellow monotheists or whatever, similar religions, things like that.
Yeah, interestingly, the legacy of the Cochin Jews in no small way has been taken over by Taha. Ibrahim, who is he looked after Sarah Cohen right up to her death, after she lost her husband and was alone. He had sort of been almost like an adopted son to them. They had not had children, and so he and his wife and their son were very much family. And he's basically kept on the legacy of the Cochin Jews.
Another good friend of the community is Tufik. What's his last? I forget his family name.
Zakaria?
Yeah, Tufik Zakaria, who is a calligrapher, and of course he knows Arabic calligraphy. But then a lot of his neighbors were Jewish in Cochin, so he wanted to learn Hebrew. And he's become a world famous Hebrew calligrapher as well.
Right, he's been exhibiting all over the place.
Especially now in Dubai, in place, they had a big exhibition of his calligraphy.
Yeah.
He's actually a very accomplished chef, and he works in one of the big hotels in Dubai now. But he is this calligrapher and prominent calligrapher. On that line, if I just throw one other thing that's going on in Dubai, some Israeli girls, teenage girls, were reading about how people learn and perceive, and amazing sophisticated research. And they read that when people read, they only need to see part of a letter, not a whole letter, and they know what it says. And they dig down deeper, and they learn that Hebrew readers usually use the top of the letter, while Arabic readers usually use the bottom of the letter. Mm. What these girls did is they created a new alphabet that's in the top Hebrew to bottom Arabic. It was a big hit at this World's Fair in Dubai. And the thing about this alphabet they created, it is immediately readable by Hebrew or Arabic speakers. Immediately, no special training. So it's sort of Tufik made me think about it. It's calligraphy in Hebrew and Arabic. But this Hebrew-Arabic thing is very interesting.
It's very cool.
The languages you know are so similar.
Wow. So Nakia has another question. The communities in the community in Cochin, we know they're Sephardic Jews. Did they come to India via Baghdad?
Yeah, great question.
So, yeah.
So their story is when the second temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, that would be in the year 70 of the Common Era. Jews fled everywhere because the Romans conquered their capital, and a number went to India at that time. And those are the original Cochin Jews. Over the years, the Cochin Jews were safe and secure, and they were sending spices to the rest of the world. So they were known a little bit, so that other Jews, especially when there was some problem in their country, came to Cochin and joined their community. And these are Jews from Yemen, Iran, Baghdad, Turkey, even a couple of European Jews came, and they joined this community with these Jews of long standing. And that intriguing combination, that's what we mean by the Cochin Jews.
But they're often called Baghdadi too, some of them. And those are the ones who've been there maybe, what, 500 years, which is why, the synagogue, it's called the Cochin Synagogue, but it was also called the Pardesi Synagogue, or newcomers.
You know, Paradesh, other foreign.
Yeah, Pardes, yeah. That's cool. Oh, very interesting. I'm trying to see if there are any
Baghdadis in other parts of India as well, such as Kolkata, where
For you, we're sticking my face so close, I'm looking to see other
reading,
questions a little bit.
And there's some, there's people that really enjoyed it. Ari, Jakila, some other people have commented that they really enjoyed the lecture.
Oh, good. Somebody put up my email address. That's fine. Yes. You're welcome. Because the whole purpose of Fulbright, and I'm a Fulbright alumnus myself, as you know, is to create these kind of personal, potentially collaborative academic connections across culture. And I believe in the Fulbright idea, as do most of us who have been so honored.
Absolutely, yeah. And Pakistan is one of the largest Fulbright programs in the world. So they send out, I think it's 600 or 700 people every year from Pakistan, it's like one of the largest programs. It's funded both by the American government, and it's also funded by the Pakistani government as well.
Good.
It's a massive program. Yeah. So, and this actually, we just had a celebration last month or month before last. It was the 75th year of Fulbright.
Yeah.
So it's been 75 years since sort of the Fulbright program had begun and started the exchanges around the world. So I think it has, in no small way, really contributed to the remarkable intellectual and cultural diversity of the United States, and then also in terms of promoting mutual understanding with other societies as well. So I think it's been quite remarkable. And I really encourage those of you who are here in Pakistan, if you're interested in studying more about other religions, particularly in the United States, visit the website for USEFP and just keep abreast, or you can even email them. And they have at least, I think today, I went today, they were saying that there are about 13 different programs that they have that send Pakistanis all around the world. So if you're interested in learning about other religions, from Pakistan to the United States, and then from United States to other parts of the world. So if you're interested in learning more or doing a fellowship, undergraduate, graduate, postdoc, the USCFP is a really good organization that administers the Fulbright. So I would encourage you to connect, and Professor Ahmed can also share my information as well for those of you who are interested. So I think if there are no more questions, I will do a conclusion then. I think Professor Katz and Ms. Goldberg, do you guys have any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to say to our audience or those that would read, that would watch the recording?
It's not academic, but
That's
I want to say it anyway. When Professor Akhtar and his wife Zafreen were planning to go for this Fulbright, naively, Ellen and I really hoped that we'd be able to come and visit about this time. And we had great plans to go up to Skardu and all these great places. So we're gonna have to wait for another time.
Okay.
But my feeling for your country is very positive and very strong. I know better from firsthand than to believe everything I read in newspapers anywhere, including in my country. Right. So God bless you. And thank you for listening to us. And your curiosity about learning about other religions, as Professor Ahmed said, not from a polemical or political point of view, but for what it means to people who are in that faith, that instinct is noble, is expansive, and I have no doubt that is what our God wants us all to be doing.
Thank you, Professor Katz. And Ellen, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I'm just grateful to Professor Akhtar and to Zoom for bringing us all together. If we can't be together physically, I'm grateful that we have this forum to share.
But I still want to go to Skardu.
Inshallah, one day we'll go together. Yeah.
That's the
plan. Professor Ahmed, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I want to say, and I will second what Dr. Allen just said, that as you know, I am in Pakistan and it is night here. Most of the times at night we sit with our old ones and ask them about what was the life in India, because they lived there and we did not. So this is one of those nights as well, I should say. And we heard the story of India, this time not about our elders, but as Dr. Nathan also said, our cousins' elders. And thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan and Ellen. Thank you for the gift of your wisdom and the gift, of course, of your time. So we really appreciate your friendship and your kindness of sharing your time with us. It was really amazing. And I think this was a wonderful way to end this year's Fulbright exchange from scholars in FIU and in Pakistan. So thank you so much for the gift of your time and for your friendship and for your kindness, and especially for that prayer. We really hope that this really helps to improve our mutual understanding and interfaith harmony, and really just so that we understand and are able to know each other, to live in a world of harmony and peace. So thank you so much for your time and for your help with that mission. All right, well, take care and have a wonderful weekend wherever you all are. And we will hopefully continue these in the new year with scholars from Pakistan giving lectures in the United States, and then American scholars responding. So we'll do the opposite next year. Take care and God bless everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.